Welcome to another segment of ACRP TV. Today, our spotlight is a segment we're calling Patient Recruitment, Today's Trends, Tomorrow's Potential. We have a special guest with us, Dr. Laurent Schockmel, who is the CEO of Antidote, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Nice to be with you, Michael.
Let's jump right in. There's a lot going on these days. Can you give us kind of your assessment, your landscape, your view of the current patient recruitment situation?
Yes, unfortunately, it has not changed that much. We're still facing a lot of issue. Patient recruitment is one of the longest bottleneck into the process. 30% of the time of a trial is basically depending on that recruitment process. And a lot of the trials, 80% of clinical trials are still delayed because they don't find enough patients. 9 out of 10 trials, original timelines is doubled in order to meet their goals. And unfortunately, still 11% of sites are not enrolling any patients.
Why is this such a chronic issue? It seems to me that, you know, I've been covering this industry for years. I know you've been involved in it for many years. It's just sort of a cyclical problem that doesn't really seem to get much better. Why? I mean, I know it's complicated. Why is it so hard to address this, you think?
Yeah, I think there are 3 main reasons. I would say cost, patient experience, and delayed approvals. So the cost is some reports shows that the single ineligible patients would cost the sponsor up to $37,000. Other estimations says that a failed visit would be $1,200 per patient. And therefore, if you look, there is a Tufts Institute study that is well known saying that every day lost in recruitments could vary from $1 to $8 million in net present value for the sponsor. So that's the cost side. On the patient experience, obviously, patients not being able to find a clinical trials, having a poor experience, are getting discouraged from future participations, which will not going to help the problem overall. And ultimately, delayed approvals also generate that overall issue of patients not accessing new drugs, and therefore creating that urgent need for us to solve that issue and being able to bring new drugs on the market faster.
Now, I know you've talked a lot about the problem with the patient bottleneck. I wonder if you could first tell us your conception of that, what that term means to you, and then how we can address it, because it is one of those recurring problems.
Yes, so first and foremost, I would say in a recruitment process, you go from the top of the funnel, finding the patients, to bringing them, enrolling them, randomizing them into the trial. So it's all a process. So those bottlenecks occur at the different places in this process. And on the top ones, it is to find the right patients in the right numbers. It's a number game. And you obviously can do that through social media, but it's not sufficient. At the Antidote, we are able to engage a network of partners, out of which 250 patient advocacy groups that enable us to target very specific patients with a given conditions. So finding the patients and bringing them to a place where they are going to engage through an online pre-screener. So the second aspect of it is this digital encounter. When a patient's, because I mean, this is digital recruitment, so everything is made through online pre-screeners, and you have obviously the state-of-the-art of online pre-screeners will enable to get the patients with the right questions, with the right inclusion-exclusion criteria to drive them to a positive experience not having too complicated questions, but also being able to qualify those patients at the right point. But we have also identified that it's not sufficient. All the technology in the world may not be sufficient, and that's why you need a level of human touch. So typically, we are calling those patients after they pass the pre-screener to verify the information and potentially ask other questions that you cannot ask through a digital encounter. But by working that way, we also face that the sites and the PIs are facing some bottlenecks that we're trying to resolve early on. So giving some examples. So for instance, patients come to the sites for the first visit and don't necessarily have the right lab values that they need for this enrollment. So we have the ability to trigger a lab test, to a lab order for those patients to take a lab test before even going to the sites. Another well-known bottleneck is getting the EMR or the chart of the patients, and therefore being able to provide that access to the sites directly so that they don't have to sometimes wait 2 months. We have some project where the sites were basically spending 2 months to track those EHR for the patients. So that's the kind of bottleneck that we are trying to solve also, but here we are in bottom of the funnel. Other example could be transportations, patients who are facing difficulty to reach the site. So if you can trigger a ride, for instance, would be also facilitate and help accelerate having the patients reaching the sites and meeting with the PI. And lastly,
let me ask you about the future. Let's talk about how COVID has impacted patient recruitment and maybe how you see things unfolding over the next year or two. Do you think we'll see much of an impact?
Well, I mean, first we had a big impact. Obviously, a lot of clinical trials have been paused. Some reports say that 67% of the trials have been paused in the US and reduced compared to 2019. Although that is temporary, even in China, in February, they got an increase in patient enrollment by 240%, while they were paused before because they were earlier in the process and the pandemic. So we are hopeful in ourselves. We had 80% of our trials who got paused, and we have only one at this point today. We still paused. All the other have resumed. So we see that I mean the trials are starting again. But we compared actually March to August 2020 to the same period in 2019 to see what was the impact on engagement. So actually we see more engagement. It's maybe counterintuitive, but we saw more engagement from the patients, 13% more from this year versus last year. And we see a lot more registration, 80% more registration in our project this year versus last year. So yes, I mean, obviously there were less trials, less sites open, but the patients were maybe had more time to surf on internet and look for trials. So there was an interest. The other thing which was also interesting is COVID has got a lot of media attention for the trials, and therefore explaining what a trial is made of, 3 phases, it takes long, a lot of things that the patient didn't necessarily, or people didn't necessarily know before. So I think COVID, even if it's a terrible pandemic, it had, I think, a positive impact on clinical research. And hopefully that will last because it has been a kind of awareness for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are hoping that. It looks that way. That's encouraging. Nice final note. I really appreciate your time. This has been another ACRP TV segment, our spotlight today on patient recruitment, today's trends, tomorrow's potential. And Dr. Laurent Schockmel, the CEO of Antidote, has joined us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.